I sat there in the soft restaurant light, the linen napkin still folded in my lap, when my daughter's voice cut through the jazz. "Just stay quiet tonight, Mom." The words slipped between courses like a blade. After raising her alone, after paying her tuition, after surviving the years she forgot to call, apparently, silence is all I'm invited to bring to the table. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The restaurant was the kind with quiet jazz and low lighting, the kind where waiters wore suits and carried themselves like stagehands in a Broadway production. The walls were lined with black and white photos of celebrities who had probably eaten there once in the 90s. And the table linens were so stiff with starch, they could have stood up on their own. Lauren had chosen the place, of course. She always did. "This place does the best halibut in the city. It's flown in daily from Nova Scotia," she announced as they were seated, brushing a non-existent wrinkle from her cashmere sleeve. Her voice had that careful, practiced tone that carried just far enough to be overheard by the couple at the next table. "You should try it, Mom. It's not like that heavy buttered stuff you like." Virginia smiled politely, tucking her cloth napkin onto her lap without comment. Ben slid in next to Ellie, his phone already in hand. He tapped the screen absently, checking stocks, pretending to check emails, maybe just using it as a shield. Ellie kept her eyes on the menu. She hadn't looked directly at Lauren since they walked in. Conversation started light. A few remarks about parking, the weird weather for October, some forced laughter from Ben. Lauren narrated the wine list like she had stock in the vineyard, but the undercurrent was there, thick, unspoken. Something about tonight was not just dinner. Then came the silence. It fell halfway through appetizers, after Lauren's third anecdote about the boutique firm she'd just started consulting for, when the last fork clinked against a plate, and no one spoke for a beat too long. That's when Virginia tried. Her voice, warm and soft, had that maternal timbre that somehow made everything feel like home. "Ellie, do you remember that Halloween when you were 5? You were so tiny in that astronaut costume, but you refused to take your helmet off, even at the dinner table." Lauren's chair creaked slightly as she straightened. "Can you not?" Her voice cut clean, like a knife pressed to glass. "Just stay quiet tonight, please." It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to silence the entire table. The jazz kept playing. Somewhere behind them, silverware clinked on porcelain. But their table might as well have been frozen in amber. Virginia blinked, lips still parted as if she hadn't fully registered the blow yet. Ben pretended to scroll through his phone, eyebrows raised in faux distraction, though his thumb wasn't moving. Ellie stared at her water glass. The flickering candle between her and Lauren cast shadows on her face that made her look even younger. Like the girl she'd once been before all of this, before Lauren decided what version of her was acceptable. Virginia said nothing. She folded her napkin once, then again, laying it beside her untouched plate, with almost ceremonial precision. No rebuttal, no gasp, just a nod. Ellie's throat bobbed. "Mom," she started, barely above a whisper, but Virginia reached for her wine glass and offered a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's fine," she said, as if Lauren's words had been a mild correction, not a public dismissal. "I'm fine." Lauren went back to her wine, already bored. Ellie looked across the table, and something flickered behind her eyes. Anger? Shame? Helplessness? Outside the window, a line of cabs rolled by in the drizzle. Inside, the warmth felt artificial, trapped. No one spoke for the rest of the first course. And then the waiter arrived with a second bottle of wine, one that no one had ordered. He placed it on the table with a crisp nod. "Compliments of the gentleman at the bar," he said. Lauren frowned, looking toward the bar. Ellie looked too, and froze, because the man sitting there was looking right at her. The rain was still coming down when Virginia got home, streaking across the bay window in long, shivering lines. She didn't bother turning on the lights. The house was quiet the way she liked it, settled, not silent. The kind of quiet that remembered things. She kicked off her shoes, left her coat draped over the banister, and padded barefoot across the hardwood, her movements deliberate. Her fingers brushed the banister rail like she was steadying herself, not from age, but from restraint. The dining room still smelled faintly of the candles she'd burned last night. She walked past it. The living room held the echo of laughter from years past. She walked past that too. Past the photographs on the wall, Ellie with pigtails, Lauren in her private school blazer, the three of them in the park back when family still felt like family. She opened the door to her study. It wasn't a grand room. The walls were lined with shelves, heavy with books and document boxes. A small lamp cast a cone of amber light across her desk. She sat slowly and pulled the manila folder from the bottom drawer, the one with the gold sticker tab that read Estate Personal. The paper felt heavier than she remembered. The top page was the most current version of her will. She read through the names, one by one. The ink was crisp, her own initials in the margins confirming every line. Lauren's name appeared 5 times, twice as primary executor. Sole inheritor of the Lake Tahoe property. Guardian of Ellie's trust should anything happen. Custodian of the family archives. Virginia stared at it, long and hard. Then, with a pen that had been tucked beside the folder for years, she wrote 4 words in the white space beside Lauren's name, not worthy of stewardship. She set the pen down gently, not angry, not bitter. Just final. From another drawer, she pulled out the box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were her private records. Receipts from the hospital Ellie had been admitted to when she was 15. Journals in her own looping cursive. Yellowed bank statements. Early investment paperwork from a startup that failed. Before it mattered, she ran her hands over the old pages like a pianist testing keys she hadn't touched in years. Beneath all of that, wrapped in a thick elastic band, was a bundle of letters, some addressed to her daughters, some never sent. She thumbed through the stack until she found them. 5 envelopes addressed to Lauren, all written during her college years. 1 sent after the miscarriage, 1 after the first marriage unraveled, 2 more from the years Lauren didn't call on Mother's Day. 1 was still sealed. She opened it, read her own words. You don't have to be right all the time to be loved. You don't have to control the room to earn your place in it. I miss the version of you that let herself be small sometimes. Virginia folded the letter back up, slower this time. The air in the room felt heavy, not suffocating, intentional. The voice came from the doorway. You let her curate the world. Virginia didn't turn around. She had a talent for it. Maybe, Dolores said, stepping inside, but maybe it's time to uncurate your legacy. Dolores had been her friend for 30 years, wore turquoise like armor, and didn't bother with passive aggression, blessedly allergic to it. She sat in the armchair without waiting for an invitation and looked at the stack of records like it was a crime scene. She doesn't deserve the keys, Dolores said plainly. Virginia looked at her for a long moment. No, she said, almost surprised by the sound of her own voice. She doesn't. A silence passed between them, but it wasn't empty. Then Virginia reached for the phone. Her hands were steady as she dialed. The number hadn't changed in years. She could have recited it in her sleep. The line rang once, then twice. A click, then, Samuel Reese. Samuel, it's Virginia. I need to make some changes. A pause. To the will? No, she said. To who gets to define what I leave behind? Another pause, longer this time. I'll move some things around. Want to come in tomorrow? Book me for the earliest slot, Virginia said. Her voice was glass smooth now. Time to unlist someone. She hung up before he could reply. The study was still. Dolores didn't speak, just leaned back in the chair, watching her friend with quiet respect. Virginia stood, gathered the letters, the receipts, the journals, her story, and laid them out across the desk in neat rows. She wasn't grieving anymore. She was editing. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon scones. Too loud, too bright, and a little too crowded for a Wednesday afternoon. But that was why Virginia chose it. Public, neutral, and unpretentious. A place where no one would lower their voice to sound important. Ellie was already seated at the back when Virginia walked in, both hands wrapped around a mug like she needed its warmth to keep herself upright. Her coat was still damp from the rain. She looked up the second. The bell above the door chimed. Virginia offered a small wave before slipping into the seat across from her. I wasn't sure you'd come, Ellie said, brushing her bangs back with a trembling hand. I said I would, Virginia replied simply, unwinding her scarf. Her voice was soft but unyielding. They sat in silence for a moment, long enough for the waitress to drop off Virginia's coffee, long enough for Ellie to gather the courage to say what had clearly been sitting on her chest since the restaurant. "I'm sorry," she said. "For the way she spoke to you, I should have said something." Virginia looked at her daughter, really looked. The shadows under Ellie's eyes weren't just exhaustion. They were generational, inherited silences, swallowed opinions. "You don't have to apologize for her," Virginia said, stirring her coffee with a steady hand. "I know, but—" "I heard her," Virginia cut in gently. "That's enough." Ellie nodded, but it was slow and unsure, like her body wasn't convinced yet that forgiveness could come in such a short sentence. They sat for a few minutes without speaking. Outside, the city moved like it always did, hurried, distracted, anonymous. Then Virginia said, "Do you still write?" Ellie blinked. "What?" "You used to write little stories about the cat who could time travel, about the girl who lived in a treehouse." Ellie laughed, soft, surprised. "God, I haven't thought about those in years." "You used to leave them under my pillow," Virginia said. "Like presents." Ellie looked down at her coffee. "I stopped when it stopped feeling like anyone wanted to read them." Virginia didn't flinch, but she leaned forward, just enough for her voice to land without force. "Maybe you were looking in the wrong direction." Ellie swallowed hard, blinking fast. She always made me feel like I was some unfinished version of her. Like everything I did had to pass through her filter first. Virginia nodded once. "She made me a guest at my own table. That ends now." Ellie looked up sharply. There it was. A shift, like a bird turning midair. "Do you know," Ellie said, her voice quieter now, "how many times I wanted to ask you if it ever hurt? The way she rewrote everything, like we were just furniture in her monologue." Virginia didn't answer right away. She let the question breathe. "I didn't want to fracture what little peace we had," she said finally. "But I've realized, keeping quiet didn't preserve anything. It just made space for the loudest person in the room." Ellie exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Then she smiled, small and real. "You were never just background." For the first time in what felt like ages, Virginia smiled back, not politely, not carefully. "They say the victors write history," she said, "but I kept the receipts." Ellie's smile faltered, not in fear, but in awe. Then, after a beat, she reached across the table and gently touched Virginia's hand. "I'm still listening," she said. Before Virginia could answer, her phone buzzed against the table. Once, then again, she picked it up, expecting spam, but it was a text. From an unknown number. "Check your mailbox." Before she does. The sky was slate gray by the time Virginia stepped out of the cab, arms full of binders and folders, her boots clicking steadily across the wet pavement. Samuel Reese's office sat on the second floor of a converted Victorian, a brass plaque beside the buzzer reading simply, "Estate." Trust, Counsel. Inside, the air smelled faintly of ink, cedar, and old legal pads. Familiar. Sober. Samuel stood as she entered, tall and neat as ever in his charcoal blazer, his silver hair combed like a man still trying to impress himself. "You brought the whole archive," he said, eyebrows lifting at the weight of what she placed on his desk. "I brought what matters," Virginia replied, unsnapping the leather straps of the old folio first, "and what no longer should." He waited until she sat before touching anything. "This all still in effect?" he asked, gesturing to the original will. "Until 20 minutes from now," she said. His smile was restrained, but real. "All right, then." For the next 40 minutes, the two of them worked in quiet precision. Samuel read each clause aloud as Virginia struck it down or revised it in measured ink strokes. Lauren's name disappeared from the executor line, from the property list, from the archiving rights, from the emergency medical directive. With every removal, Virginia felt something loosen in her chest. Not like a balloon drifting off, but like a bolt finally turning after years of rust. She slid a separate binder across the desk, this one labeled Alternatives. Samuel skimmed it, pages flagged, notes neatly margined. "Ellie, then," he said. "Full archival steward, contact of record." "She listens," Virginia said simply. "That's more than most heirs do," he replied, marking the changes. "Who gets the Tahoe property?" "No one in the family," she said. That goes into trust for the Lake and Forest Preservation Initiative. He blinked, surprised, but nodded. Understood. And the rest? Virginia handed over another list, this one handwritten. Her cursive was sharp, elegant, unmistakably deliberate. The Northside Library Literacy Project, the Theater Foundation downtown, and the Public School Reading Fund. I want their names in ink, not as an afterthought. Samuel nodded again, slower this time. That's a hell of a pivot, Virginia. She smiled faintly. No, it's a restoration. He reached for a legal pad and flipped to a fresh page. We'll need a new clause for this section, legacy conditions. I've written one, she said, pulling a single folded page from her coat. She laid it flat on the desk. Facing him, the title was clear, centered, and underlined in her firm hand. Silencing Disinheritance. Samuel read the clause silently. His mouth didn't move, but his eyes tightened slightly as he reached the final line. He looked up. You sure about this? Absolutely. This will hold, but it will sting. Virginia's voice was calm. Then it's working. He reached for the stamp. Revoked slammed in red across the top page of the old document. Final. Visible. Undeniable. The new documents were cleaner, sharper, tethered to purpose. You've said more with these papers, Samuel said, sliding them toward her for signature, than most people say in a lifetime of toasts. Virginia took the pen. Her hand didn't shake. Good. No one ever listens during toasts. She signed her name, once, then again. And again. By the time she was done, the clean slate was real, legal, binding, bloodless. Samuel gathered the pages, slipping them into a flat folder. Want me to mail a certified copy to Lauren? No, Virginia said, rising. She'll find out when it matters. That's always been her way. She pulled on her coat, then paused at the door. And if she tries to challenge it? She won't win, Samuel said, matter of fact. I didn't ask if she'd win, Virginia said, turning back. I asked what she'd try. Before he could answer, her phone buzzed again in her coat pocket. Another text. This one from the same number. Too late. She already opened it. The call came just after midnight. Virginia didn't pick up. She watched the screen light up on her nightstand. Lauren, mobile. The name still capitalized in her contacts like it had always been, from the days when even her children's names had to be perfectly formatted. The call rang out, then again, then a third time, this one longer, like Lauren believed that sheer insistence could claw her back into relevance. Virginia reached out, tapped the screen, and blocked the number. Not in anger, not in triumph. With finality. She set the phone down face down, then turned over in bed and went back to sleep. The next morning she woke early and made herself a pot of Earl Grey. The house was quiet, sun beginning to warm the oak floors. No drama, no performance, no strategy to counter. She liked it this way. In the study, she opened her laptop and created a new digital folder. All communications ceased, effective immediately into it. She saved a typed note, brief but precise. As of October 15th, all non-emergency correspondence with Lauren Holbrook is to be considered permanently closed. No calls, no texts, no visits. This is a conscious, considered, and final decision. She added her initials, saved the file, encrypted it. Then she printed a single-page letter, handwritten, unadorned, folded into thirds. It wasn't venomous, it wasn't cruel. It simply told the truth, her truth. Why she had made the choices she had. The years she stayed silent to keep peace. The moments she regretted not interrupting the rewrite of her own story. And why legacy, to her, now meant something beyond blood. Dolores came by to sign it as witness. Samuel picked it up that afternoon. By evening, it was filed, scanned, notarized, and archived with the rest of her updated estate documents. She removed Lauren as her emergency contact from every record. Her doctor, her pharmacy, her insurance portal. She replaced her with Dolores and Ellie in that order. There was no emotion in it anymore, no sadness, just a correction. Like crossing out the wrong word in a manuscript and writing in the right one, firmly, without apology. She spent the rest of the evening on the porch, wrapped in a quilt with a mug of lemon ginger tea, watching the sky bleed into burnt orange. The maple in her front yard had finally begun to shed, the leaves flaring out in bursts of amber and rust. A breeze rustled the wind chimes, And the quiet was the kind that filled you rather than emptied you. Peace, she realized, didn't mean the absence of noise. It meant not needing to brace for the next rupture. She heard footsteps before she saw them, soft on the walkway. A familiar rhythm, Ellie, in a hoodie and jeans, holding 2 takeaway cups. Her hair was up. She looked lighter somehow, like something unseen had been lifted from her shoulders too. "You sure?" Ellie asked, handing her a cup. Virginia took it. "I've never been more sure." Ellie settled into the chair beside her. Neither of them said much. They didn't need to. The wind spoke in leaf, whispers. A dog barked somewhere down the block. After a few minutes, Ellie shifted, hesitant. "I think she's going to fight it. I know. She's going to call lawyers, maybe even the press. She'll make it about humiliation, not harm." Virginia didn't flinch. "She can spin whatever story she wants, but it won't be mine." Ellie was quiet a long time. Then she leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I wish it had been different." "So do I," Virginia said, resting her cheek gently against Ellie's hair. "But we're not responsible for the versions of us people invent to make themselves feel bigger." Ellie nodded, eyes glassy. The sky turned navy, the last of the sun swallowed up by the horizon. Then Virginia's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She reached for it with the same calm she had the night before, already expecting another attempt. But this time it wasn't a call. It was a photo. A blurry image of a page, her page, the final clause of her will, silencing Crocker disinheritance. Below it, a single message. "You really want to play this out, Mom? Let's play." Virginia didn't panic. She didn't respond to the message, didn't type back, didn't forward it. She simply held her phone up to the desk lamp, captured a high-res screenshot of the image, Lauren's petty invasion, and saved it to the cloud. Then she opened her estate archive folder, renamed it. Legal documentation, inheritance interference, Exhibit 01, unauthorized photograph. She uploaded the file, dated it, tagged it. When she called Samuel the next morning, her tone was more clinical than concerned. She sent a picture of the clause, my clause. There was a pause on the line. Then, was it a threat? Virginia exhaled. It was a dare. "I'll flag it in the file," Samuel said. "Every piece helps. If it's ever challenged, we're ready." "No, she is," Virginia corrected. "She just doesn't know it yet." By the weekend, Virginia had pulled down the painting in the hallway. It was a watercolor landscape, Montana, 1986. Lauren had always planned to take it off her hands, once she found the right gallery wall, but Virginia never offered it. And now, she never would. She wrapped it in brown paper, slid a note underneath the twine, to the Community Arts Center, unframed, like the land it came from. She placed it in the donation pile beside the walnut side table, the Depression glass compote, and the silver-plated candlesticks from her grandmother's wedding. One by one, she chose what left with grace. One by one, she decided what did not need to be passed down, like expectation. She did not catalog these in spreadsheets. She did not post photos or ask permission. This was not a curated archive. It was a release. By Monday afternoon, 10 items sat on the dining table. Not heirlooms, not trophies. Not things chosen for market value, but for memory. A chipped bookend in the shape of an owl. The wool blanket Ellie used during her childhood fevers. A broken wristwatch once worn by Virginia's father. The leather strap mended with fishing line. A pewter dish that always held paper clips. A dog-eared novel, its margins full of Virginia's thoughts. And 5 others, each with a handwritten tag, tied in linen thread. The tags didn't explain, they recalled. "When you hid under this at the hospital and wouldn't come out. You once called this the owl who knew secrets." Because sometimes usefulness isn't what gives a thing worth. Dolores arrived as the last tag was being tied. She took one look at the dining table and raised her eyebrows. "Well," she said, setting down a bag of oranges. "You're not just cutting her off," Virginia glanced up. "No?" Dolores folded her arms. "You're cutting her out of the legacy lens." Virginia paused mid-knot, then sat back in the chair. "She spent years trying to control the edit," she said quietly. But she never saw the frame. Dolores didn't reply. She just reached for an orange, peeled it slowly, and handed Virginia half. They sat there in silence. the kind that smelled like citrus and sounded like closure. Later that evening, Ellie stopped by to pick up the packages for donation. She smiled when she saw the tags, her fingers lingering over the bookend. "She's watching you," Ellie said, almost as an afterthought. "Online, I think she's creating her own version of the story." "I'm sure she is." "People might believe it." Virginia met her daughter's gaze. "Only the ones who need to." She helped Ellie load the car. When the trunk closed, the sound echoed into the cool dusk like punctuation. Ellie lingered in the driveway, as if she wanted to say something else, but the wind picked up, and Virginia gave her a nod that meant, "We're okay." She went back inside. Her phone was waiting. Another message. This one from a different number. Unknown, but local. "You always underestimated who was watching. You forgot who taught her how to win." Attached, a video. Virginia hesitated for a full breath before tapping play. It opened on Lauren, standing in what looked like a private office, speaking directly to camera. "I kept quiet out of love, but now it's time people hear the truth." Virginia didn't finish the video. She didn't need to. She'd heard Lauren's voice twist truths enough times to know how the rest would go. Measured tone, framed sincerity, the narrative clipped into sound bites for sympathy. It wasn't rage that filled her as she closed the app. It was resolve. She stood, walked to the cabinet in her study, and opened the small wall safe behind the file shelves. Inside was the new binder, black leather embossed in silver. Revised estate plan, October 2025. She slid it into place, locked the dial, and turned away. The sound of the latch ceiling echoed louder than it should have in the quiet room. Back at her desk, she opened her laptop, uploaded the latest PDF files, and composed 3 emails. To Ellie, subject line, "For your records, no rush to open." To Samuel, final version, confirmed copies in physical storage. To her bank officer, please update designated contacts accordingly. Lauren Holbrook is to be removed from all financial accounts, effective immediately. Confirmation requested by end of business day. She read each one twice, hit send, and exhaled. Then she opened the account portal, one tab at a time. Retirement, savings, joint legacy fund, even the old life insurance policy she'd set up in 1994, the one Lauren had always assumed would fall under her stewardship someday. Remove beneficiary confirm. Every confirmation click landed like a piano key being played for the first time in years. Sharp, final, musical in its certainty. Next, she logged into the county records system and filed the paperwork to transfer the title of the house into a trust, Virginia May Holbrook Legacy Trust, under institutional management, bound by the new estate instructions. No loopholes, no loophole finders. She uploaded one final clause, drafted herself and reviewed by Samuel. Clause 18B, no proxy authorization. No individual previously removed from estate directives may act on behalf of the trust or claim legal authority as representative, relative, or proxy. Exceptions: Eleanor Grace Holbrook, with written approval, and Dolores Wynn, standing approval. She printed it, initialed it, filed it. Only then did she lean back in her chair, not victorious, free. Later that afternoon, Ellie arrived unannounced with 2 sandwiches and a wary look. She didn't ask about the video. She didn't need to. The air between them had the charged stillness of 2 people who'd both seen a storm coming and chosen to fortify, not run. She posted it publicly, Ellie said, sitting across from her. It's already getting picked up. A podcast host called her brave. Virginia unwrapped her sandwich calmly. They haven't seen her behind the microphone. She's implying elder coercion. Virginia raised one eyebrow. Ellie nodded. She said this isn't really you. That someone manipulated you into rewriting your will, isolating yourself. She said I should be ashamed of what I've enabled. Virginia took a bite of her sandwich, chewed, and dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin. Did it work? No, Ellie said softly, but I won't pretend it didn't sting. Virginia reached across the table and placed her hand over her daughter's. You don't have to pretend anymore. Ellie blinked, eyes glassy. You really did it, Virginia nodded. No more accounts, no more plans, no more. Ellie trailed off, searching for the right word. Virginia offered it without hesitation. Permission slips. Ellie smiled. tears unshed but present. You wrote yourself out of her narrative. No, Virginia said, eyes clear. I wrote myself back into mine. They sat in silence, the kind that filled the whole room. Then Ellie's phone buzzed. She checked it, froze. What is it? Virginia asked. Ellie turned the screen toward her. It was a post. Lauren's again, a still frame of the video, but now paired with a caption. My mother's not well. She's being influenced by people with their own agendas. I'll be filing for conservatorship this week. Virginia stared at the screen. Then slowly, she stood. We need to talk to Samuel, she said. She crossed the room to the safe, and for the first time in days, her hand shook. The car pulled up at 2:37 p.m. Black Lexus, pristine. Lauren always did know how to time an arrival for optics, not sincerity. Virginia stood behind the living room curtain, still and alert. She didn't flinch, didn't move to turn off the lamp or close the blinds further. She simply watched. Lauren stepped out wearing a soft gray sweater and ballet flats, curated casual. Her hair was pulled back into a loose chignon, the kind meant to look accidental, but took at least 20 minutes to pin right. She held nothing in her hands. No briefcase, no bag. Just herself, well packaged, tightly controlled, emotionally rehearsed. She climbed the porch steps slowly, casting a glance at the flower pots, the wind chimes, the welcome mat that no longer applied to her. Then she knocked, 3 times, measured, open-palmed. Not too loud, just loud enough to be heard. Mom, she called gently, as if Virginia might be napping. It's just me. I thought maybe we could talk. Virginia didn't blink, didn't breathe too hard. She just remained behind the curtain, silent. Still. Lauren waited a moment, knocked again. I'm not here to fight. Another pause, a sigh. The tone shifted, just slightly. I just think this is all a big misunderstanding. You've always said we should talk things through. Virginia's fingers grazed the small silver key around her neck, the one that opened the safe. She didn't clutch it. She didn't need to. It was already done. Across the street, a familiar blue sedan pulled into the curb. Dolores stepped out, sunglasses on, lips set in a line that didn't need explaining. She caught Virginia's eye through the window and gave the smallest nod. She'd said earlier that morning, if she shows up, I'll be close. And she was. Lauren turned back toward the street, looking once in the direction of the parked car. Her brow furrowed, just a flicker. Then she adjusted her tone again, softer this time, almost a whisper. Mom, if you won't answer the phone, I had to come. I didn't want to go this route, but you left me no choice. Another silence, another long, expectant breath. Virginia remained still. Inside her chest, her heartbeat was steady, not defiant, not afraid, just certain. After 10 minutes, Lauren stepped off the porch. The illusion cracked in her walk, a little too fast, a little too rigid. Not a retreat, not yet, but not the graceful exit she'd envisioned. Her face gave nothing away, but her hands betrayed her, clenched too tightly as she climbed into the car and drove off without a backward glance. Virginia waited until the engine sound faded completely. Then she stepped away from the window. In the study, she opened her journal, the same one she'd kept since Ellie's birth. She flipped past decades of entries, birthdays, quiet fears, notes never sent, and found the first blank page. She wrote, Sometimes silence speaks loudest. Sometimes presence is a performance. Today I chose neither. She closed the book, laid it flat. There was a knock at the back door this time, quieter, familiar. Ellie. Virginia let her in without a word. Ellie didn't ask what had just happened. She already knew. She'll try to make herself the victim now, Ellie said, peeling off her jacket. She already has, Virginia replied. They stood there, framed in the soft afternoon light, 2 women bonded by the grief of being miscast and the courage of rewriting the script. Virginia walked to the sideboard, poured 2 glasses of water. Ellie accepted hers, then hesitated. You still sure? She asked. Virginia's reply came not in words, but in the way she lifted her chin, the way her hand didn't shake this time when she reached for the key around her neck and slipped it off. She handed it to Ellie. You'll keep it safe now, she said, in case I ever forget what silence protected me from. Ellie took the key. Before she could respond, Virginia's phone buzzed again on the table behind them. Another message. Check your front step. I left you something to think about. The envelope on the front step was pale blue. Heavy stock, embossed return address. Lauren's name nowhere on it, of course. She never left fingerprints when she could leave implication. But Virginia knew her daughter's hand even when someone else held the pen. Inside, a printed form, half-filled. A statement of concern, filed but unsigned. The kind that suggested, not demanded. The kind that fed on doubt. I worry my mother is being manipulated. I'm concerned about her mental clarity. She has made decisions that don't align with her previously stated wishes. Virginia read it once, then again, slower. Then she folded it back into its envelope, walked into her study, and placed it, untouched, into the red folder labeled Inheritance Interference, Level 2. Then she called Samuel. He answered on the second ring. I've been expecting you. She left it on the step, Virginia said. Didn't even seal the flap. I've already filed the counter. You were that sure? Virginia, Samuel said calmly. You've recorded 5 full rationale sessions in my office. 2 notarized statements. 3 doctors have certified your cognition across the last 12 months, including your neurologist and your general practitioner. He paused, then added with a trace of grim satisfaction. You have better documentation than most CEOs drafting succession plans. Virginia allowed herself a small smile. Did you submit the timeline log? This morning, dated, signed, video stamped. We also included the handwritten clause and the audio from the conservatorship comment on her public video post. So she played herself. Samuel chuckled softly. Let's just say she assumed the Whisper network still worked. She didn't expect you'd come armed with a chorus of facts. Virginia's tone sharpened, but didn't rise. People like her count on whispers. Samuel's voice softened. You gave me documentation. She glanced at her closed laptop. It's my favorite language. There was a pause, a long one. Then Samuel said, no response yet from the court. But I suspect this dies in the clerk's inbox. Quietly, no escalation. Virginia didn't reply right away. She was watching the wind through the maple leaves outside. Orange, gold, fading, but free. Let it die, she said finally. Not everything deserves a rebuttal. By the following week, Virginia had found herself a rhythm. She volunteered every Thursday at the Theater Foundation, the same one she'd named in her revised will, filing playbills, folding donation letters, helping the archivist organize the costume room. No one knew who she was to Lauren Holbrook. No one asked. To them, she was just Virginia, polite, efficient, unbothered by dusty mannequins and mothballed curtains. She laughed easily with the interns, took her coffee with cream, corrected typos with a red pen, not because she needed to be right, but because words deserved to land clean. It was a quiet joy, a clean kind. Ellie stopped by one Thursday afternoon to drop off a stack of books. She found Virginia in the back office, sorting through a drawer of prop jewelry with the director's assistant. Tell me this isn't a real diamond, Virginia was saying dryly, holding up a cocktail ring the size of a doorknob. Ellie laughed, caught mid-breath. You look like you belong here, Virginia shrugged. I always liked backstage better than center stage. They shared a look, a long, knowing one. Outside, the sky was shifting. That late October glow that made every shadow feel deeper. Ellie walked her to the car. Neither of them brought up Lauren, or court, or press. Some fights were won in the silence after the shouting. As Virginia opened her car door, Ellie said, You do know she'll try something else. I do. You ready for it? Virginia smiled. I've already outwritten her. She slid into the car, closed the door. Her phone buzzed once as she buckled in. A new message. So that's how it is. You want a public game? Let's raise the curtain. Attached. A court notification. Lauren had filed for power of attorney reversal, this time with legal counsel. The email came with a subject line too polished to trust, confirming your generosity, spring gala sponsorship. Virginia clicked it open, already suspecting. There, in elegant serif font and formal gratitude, the message welcomed Mrs. Lauren Holbrook's generous underwriting of our Emerging Voices grant, made on behalf of her family legacy, a donation from Lauren, in Virginia's name, to her foundation. It took less than a minute for Virginia to dial the number. Cam Winston, artistic director, charming and sharp-edged in equal measure, picked up on the second ring. Virginia, we're thrilled. She wasn't authorized to use my name, Virginia interrupted, her tone flat but composed. She's not part of this foundation. I need to know the donation amount, and I need to know when it was received. Cam hesitated. It came through yesterday, anonymous fund designation at first. Then she followed up this morning with a press sheet draft. Return it. There was a pause. Cam exhaled. I had a feeling you'd say that. Honestly, it didn't feel right. The phrasing, it read like a PR pivot, not a gift. It was neither, Virginia said. It was narrative laundering. Well, Cam said, his voice lighter now. It's rare to see this level of clarity, especially around money. It's not clarity, Virginia replied. It's boundaries in cash. The refund went out that afternoon. Cam called again the next day. We updated the program. Her name's nowhere near the event. Good, but yours is. Virginia froze, fingers resting lightly on her desk. I didn't request that. You didn't have to, Cam said. The donation you made last spring, the one you insisted be anonymous, we've decided to acknowledge it, quietly, thoughtfully. You funded the new playwright's residency. The program's built around the idea of reclaiming the narrative. Felt fitting. Virginia's throat tightened, not with emotion exactly, but with something that felt like stillness, finding its voice. She opened her mouth, then paused. Will it be loud? Cam chuckled. It'll be small, but permanent. Just your name, one line, on every playbill, every grant form, every portfolio binder. There was a pause. Is that okay? Virginia swallowed. It's more than okay. 2 weeks later, she stood at the back of the gala hall. Not center stage, not seated at a reserved table. She was in the wings, near the coat check, nursing a glass of ginger ale and watching the new playwrights deliver 5-minute readings from their works in progress. One young woman, no older than 23, read a monologue about a daughter who learns too late that love and control are not synonyms. Her hands shook as she read, but her voice did not. Ellie joined her halfway through the third piece, sliding into the chair beside her with quiet reverence. She tried to sponsor the event at the last minute, Ellie said under her breath. Offered to double the original donation if they'd reprint the programs. They didn't? No. Cam told her the space was already full. Virginia smiled. It is. They didn't clap like the others, they just listened. And when the final spotlight dimmed, Virginia stood, not to be seen, but because it felt right to leave on her own terms. That night, she found the new program in her purse. Near the back, in fine print, beneath the list of core sponsors and monthly donors, was a simple line. In recognition of Virginia May Holbrook for her belief in stories reclaimed. She read it twice, then folded the page, tucked it into the back of her journal, and turned out the light. Her phone buzzed once. She didn't check it. But across town, in a hotel lobby lit too harshly for comfort, Lauren was watching the live stream replay of the gala on her phone, jaw tight, eyes glassy. Her voice barely audible as she whispered into the receiver. Then make the next move. I want her name off everything. Start with the grant. End with the house. Virginia didn't respond to the message. Not when it came in, not an hour later. Not after she read it 3 times. Once for content, once for tone, and once just to watch the words flatten under their own weight. Start with the grant. End with the house. It wasn't a threat exactly. Lauren was too practiced for that. It was a dare dressed up as indignation. A bluff folded in satin. Virginia placed her phone face down. Not in defiance. Indecision. She never brought it up again. Ellie did. 3 nights later, in the kitchen while slicing pears, her voice low but steady. She sent me a message. Virginia glanced up but said nothing. Ellie laid down the knife. She said you've rewritten history, that I've been fed a curated version of everything, that there's another side I haven't heard. Virginia rinsed her hands under the tap. And? Ellie leaned against the counter, arms crossed, not in defense, but clarity. She didn't have to tell me anything, she said. I've seen it. Virginia nodded once, quietly, gratefully, and that was the end of it. Lauren never messaged again. No new filings, no emails, no veiled social posts. Just digital silence where provocation used to live. The absence was loud, but not unwelcome. That weekend, Virginia packed a small overnight bag. left Ellie a note on the counter, and drove herself down to Tybee Island. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She didn't owe anyone the itinerary. She booked a room at a quiet bed and breakfast 2 blocks from the shore, ate grits at a diner with sticky menus and kind waitresses, walked the beach in a windbreaker with the hood pulled tight and the seafoam licking at her boots, talked to no one, not even herself. At a small shop near the pier, she bought a $100 pendant, a candle that smelled like salt and eucalyptus, and a photo frame carved from driftwood. In that frame, she placed a photo taken by a stranger she'd asked while standing barefoot in front of the dunes. She wasn't smiling at the camera. She was smiling at the water. The frame read, "My own voice." She set it on her mantel when she got home, not facing the room, but angled inward, toward the chair where she liked to read. A reminder, a mirror, a reclamation. 2 days later, Samuel called. "I've updated your file," he said. "All documentation finalized. No further amendments anticipated." "You sound like a man who's closing a chapter." "I am." Virginia leaned back in her chair, the afternoon sun laying amber light across her lap. "And," she asked, "I've had clients fight like hell to write the ending they want," Samuel said. "You're the first one I've seen let go of the fight and still win." Virginia smiled, soft but sure. "Winning's never been the goal." No, she said. "It was peace. And peace doesn't require applause." They hung up with no formal goodbye. She reached for her journal, opened it to a fresh page, wrote, "There are stories I'll never correct. There are people I'll never convince. But this life, this one, belongs to me again." She capped the pen, closed the journal, and for the first time in weeks, there were no unread messages waiting. But across town, in an office lit too bright for comfort, Lauren sat beside a litigation attorney and tapped her pen on the table. "Plan A's dead," she said. "So let's talk Plan B." The oak-paneled office felt warmer than usual. Late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, striping the table in gold. Samuel had a manila folder open in front of him, its tabs arranged with surgical precision, no clutter, no hesitation. Virginia sat across from him, a small notebook in her lap, unopened. "You're certain?" Samuel asked, though his tone made it clear he already knew the answer. "Double-check everything," Virginia said. "No sale, no claim, no transfer, no backdoors." He flipped to the correct page, pointed to the clause with a capped pen. "The property is held in irrevocable trust under the Virginia May Hallbrook Legacy Entity. You've appointed Eleanor Hallbrook and the Northside Theater Foundation as co-stewards. Any alteration requires unanimous consent. No proxy rights, no succession petitions, no contested transfer." Virginia nodded once. "It's hers," she said. "And theirs, but never Lauren's, not even in fantasy." Samuel closed the folder gently. "She's filed nothing since last week. It may be over." "She's not done," Virginia said, her voice calm, not fearful. "But I am," he didn't argue. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. "To be added to the archive," she said. "Label it. Open only if challenged." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "What's inside?" "A letter, final statement, narrative and legal logic. She may find ways to twist stories in public, but she won't undo what this house has become. If she ever tries again, that letter gets delivered, unsealed, under oath." Samuel took it, turning it over in his hands like something weightier than it looked. "You've made something impossible to undo," he said quietly. Virginia shook her head. "Not impossible, just expensive, exhaustive, and humiliating. That's enough." Later that night, the living room was quiet except for the low rustle of the fireplace and the occasional creak of floorboards that had learned to settle without asking permission. Virginia stood in front of the bookshelf, reaching to the highest shelf for the small lacquered box she hadn't touched in months. Inside were 2 identical silver keys, both embossed with the word Hallbrook in thin, deliberate lettering. Dolores arrived first. Virginia handed her the key without preamble. "You'll know when," she said. Dolores didn't ask what that meant. She took the key, studied it for a second, then nodded once, curt and protective. "I hope I never have to," she said. "Me too." An hour later, Ellie came by. still in jeans and a cardigan, damp from the rain, eyes sharp as ever. Virginia handed her the second key. "This one's yours for more than emergencies," she said. Ellie turned it over in her hand like a question. "What does it open?" Virginia smiled. "Everything she wanted." Ellie's voice dropped. "And what if she comes for it again?" "Then you unlock the truth." They didn't hug. That wasn't their rhythm, but the silence between them tightened, not out of discomfort, but connection. The next day, Cam from the Theater Foundation dropped by with a folder of gala photos. "You made quite the impression," he said, flipping through a few snapshots of the playbill table, the residency booth, the banner with Virginia's name stitched in clean serif across the bottom. "No one asked me for a quote," Virginia said wryly. "That's the difference," Cam replied. "Lauren wants monuments. You built something no one can raise." He paused, then added, "You've created something impossible to undo." Virginia didn't answer. She just smiled. That evening, her phone buzzed again. No contact name, just a number, likely rerouted, likely Lauren. She didn't open it, but the preview was visible, a forwarded file, notice of petition, public access event, media rights request filed. Attached, an agenda item for a local government meeting. Lauren's name was listed under speaker request. The topic? Proposal to revoke special zoning for the Halbrook Legacy Trust property. The call came from the Savannah Journal. A features writer, polite but urgent, asked if Virginia would agree to an interview regarding the recent zoning petition and the foundation's response. "We're doing a piece on legacy disputes," he explained. "There's a lot of noise, but not much clarity. We want to hear from you directly." Virginia declined the call, then declined again when he followed up over email. But on the third request, this time phrased not as an exposé, but an invitation, she replied with a short message. "I will not speak, but I will submit. One document, nothing more." And she did. 3 days later, a white envelope arrived at the Journal offices, hand-delivered, addressed in Virginia's handwriting. Inside was a single-page letter, typed, signed, dated. "To whom it may, still, concern. I have no comment on character allegations, public spectacle, or narrative strategies. I do not correct invented histories. I lived the real one. What I built in trust, in name, and in paper is public record. My estate decisions were made with full legal clarity and documented in the proper channels. I did not seek an audience. I simply claimed authorship. There are stories meant to be told aloud, and others that grow stronger when written down and left alone. This letter belongs to the latter. Virginia May Halbrook." Ellie read it at the kitchen table. The light from the window hit the paper just enough to highlight the signature at the bottom. She read it again, then a third time. When she looked up, her face was still, but her voice cracked slightly when she whispered, "It's perfect." Virginia was standing by the sink, drying her hands. She didn't turn around. "It's the last one I'll ever write on this." Ellie folded the letter back into the envelope and held it like something rare. "You don't need to say anything else," she said. "I won't." The article ran the following weekend. A half-page feature in the Sunday edition titled, "A Voice Reclaimed Through Quiet Decisions." There was no photo, just a captionless pull quote and a brief mention of Virginia's years of anonymous community support, the legal clarity of her estate filings, and the irrevocable structure of the trust. No mention of Lauren, not by name, not even in footnotes. It wasn't a dramatic story. It was something harder, balanced, undeniable. Lauren's rebuttal came 12 hours later, an Instagram story, white text on a black screen. No names, no hashtags. There's always more to the story. Sometimes silence isn't wisdom, it's guilt. It stayed up for exactly 24 hours. No one reposted it. No one commented. No one called. The silence she'd once weaponized now surrounded her. This time, it wasn't strategy. It was indifference. Dolores stopped by the following Tuesday with 2 croissants and a paper bag of loose-leaf tea. She handed Virginia the paper, folded to the feature. "They did it clean," she said. "No tabloid twists. No applause line." Virginia scanned the page and set it down. "Good." Dolores looked around the room. At the mantel, the photo frame angled inward, the sealed box near the window, then back to her friend. "And the curtain drops." Virginia smiled faintly. "Not a curtain," she said. Just a door, one I get to close. That night, as she stood at the sink brushing her teeth, her phone lit up with a final ping. Not a message, not a document. Just a calendar alert from 6 months ago, still synced. Reminder, review trust provisions with Lauren, Nov 4th. Virginia looked at it for a moment, then tapped delete event. And on the other side of town, Lauren stared at a courtroom rejection notice, appeal denied. Stamped closed without hearing. The plaque wasn't large, just brushed brass, mounted flush on the wall beside a door with a frosted window. No ribbon, no velvet curtain, no microphone. Just a quiet unveiling. The hallway buzzed with low conversation as guests arrived. Donors murmured, and board members smoothed the fronts of their jackets like they expected cameras. But Virginia stood near the back, a calm pocket in the chaos, her hands loosely clasped, a soft navy scarf knotted at her neck. She wore no name tag. The plaque read, "The Hallbrook Suite for Narrative Arts established 2025. Every silence was a sentence. This is the reply. Virginia May Hallbrook. There was no applause when it was revealed, just a shared, collective breath. Then Cam stepped forward, his voice easy and unforced. Spaces like this don't come from volume. They come from vision, he said, nodding toward Virginia. This room will be a home for those whose voices have been muted, rewritten, or deemed too quiet to carry. He glanced around the circle of chairs. Virginia didn't ask for this naming. She didn't push. She didn't perform. But she made it possible. For every young writer who will stand behind this door and finally say the thing they were never supposed to say aloud. Then he stepped back. The group moved toward the refreshments. A few staff lingered near the ribboned programs. Someone opened the new suite's door. Virginia stayed where she was. Ellie joined her a few minutes later, arms folded, her gaze fixed on the plaque. It feels like you stood up, she said softly, without ever standing. Virginia smiled. That's how real voice works, she said. They didn't speak for a while, just stood shoulder to shoulder as people filed in and out of the new space. Inside, you could already hear the beginnings of stories. A young man reading lines to himself under his breath. A girl tapping rhythm on a yellow notebook. A facilitator unboxing a set of theater masks from a canvas bag. It was exactly what Virginia had imagined. Not a monument, a stage. Later, Cam found her again. Program tucked under his arm. There's something else, he said. The boards agreed. Starting next year, we'll launch a fellowship in your name. Full support for one playwright annually, chosen for narrative reclamation. Virginia raised her eyebrows. You think anyone will apply? He grinned. We've already had 20 inquiries, and we haven't even posted the announcement yet. She exhaled slowly, not out of disbelief, but a kind of release. What will it be called? He showed her the mock-up, the May Hallbrook Fellowship. No fuss, no tagline. Just her name, planted like a flag in fertile ground. Virginia tapped the paper once, approving. I hope they write better endings than the ones they inherited. Cam's voice softened. Because of you, they will. That night, she sat by her window with her journal open, though she didn't write. She looked out at the garden instead. The stone bench beneath the dogwood, the wind chimes, the patch where the hydrangeas would bloom again next spring. The house felt quiet, but not silent. Ellie had left a note on the table. You made room, and we saw it. The photo frame still faced inward. The sand dollar pendant sat in the bowl near the keys. She didn't need to update the will. There was nothing left to lock. Everything that mattered had already been opened. And just as she rose to close the curtains, her phone buzzed once more. Not Lauren, not Samuel. A name she didn't recognize. The message was short. My mother and I just toured the Hallbrook Suite. She cried. I didn't know we were allowed to say the quiet things out loud until today. Thank you. Virginia stood in the dark for a long time, the message glowing in her hand. She whispered, You're welcome, and then turned off the light. The house lights dimmed to a soft amber. A hush rolled through the audience, not the uneasy silence of judgment, but the stillness that comes when people are ready to listen. Virginia sat in the third row, program folded neatly in her lap. She wore the same navy scarf from the dedication, looped loosely, its edges frayed from use. The theater was packed. Interns, donors, families, and a handful of students from the new fellowship. The air carried that familiar mix of anticipation and paint. Wood, dust, possibility. Ellie sat beside her, notebook balanced on her knee. She'd begun writing again, in margins and fragments, her pencil moving quietly before the lights even rose. Behind them, Dolores slipped into a seat, slightly out of breath, her turquoise scarf a small rebellion against the sea of black attire. She leaned forward, whispering with a half-smile, "It's nice when the stage finally turns." Virginia turned her head, the hint of a grin tugging her mouth. "Yes," she whispered back, "it is." The curtain rose. On stage, the play began. Not a retelling of anyone's story, but something new. A young woman standing in the center of an empty set, reading from a letter she'd written to the person who once told her to be quiet. Her voice trembled on the first line, then steadied. Virginia felt her chest lift with each word, as if the room itself were exhaling something long held. There were no nods to her, no dedications, no applause breaks carved out for gratitude. Just performance. Pure, unowned. Halfway through, Virginia noticed Cam at the aisle's edge, watching not the play, but the audience. Faces tilted up, lit by stage light, caught in the spell of story. When the final scene ended, the applause came slow, building gradually until the small room thundered. Ellie stood first, then Dolores, then everyone. Virginia didn't rise. She just watched, the way a gardener might, content to see what has finally bloomed without needing to pick it. Afterward, they stayed in their seats as the crowd thinned. The stage crew moved like shadows, resetting for the next night. Ellie leaned close. "It feels done," she said. Virginia nodded. "It is." Dolores yawned quietly, slipping her feet out of her shoes. "No text tonight, no press, no fires to put out. Feels almost unnatural." Virginia chuckled. "Peace takes getting used to." She opened her bag and pulled out a worn leather notebook, the same one that had followed her from every chapter of this story. A small white tab peeked from the final page. In Samuel's neat handwriting, stamped in blue ink, it read, "Estate file, closed, challenge-proof." Virginia smiled at the phrase. It sounded less like law and more like prophecy. She uncapped her pen and wrote slowly, carefully. The last entry she'd ever add. "My daughter told me to stay quiet at dinner, so I let my lawyer do the talking, and they're still listening." She closed the notebook, placed it in her lap, and exhaled. The kind of sigh that carries no weight, only release. From the stage, the young playwrights began returning, laughing, rearranging props, the echo of their joy spilling into the aisles. Ellie squeezed her mother's hand. "You did it," she whispered. Virginia looked at her, the corners of her mouth lifting. "No," she said softly. "We did." Outside, through the lobby's glass doors, the rain had started again, steady, gentle, cleansing. Virginia rose at last. The lights dimmed behind her as the stage door closed, the sound of laughter fading into the hum of the rain. And for the first time in years, she didn't look back.